All right, we're gonna interview a viral video star today. She's so huge that just one of her videos has gotten about 58 million views. So, Anna Kasparian, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
Hi.
Hey, so you can tell us the inspiration behind this video.
Yes.
But obviously, for those of you at home that haven't seen it, if you're one of the 3 people left on the planet who hasn't, this is from 2018, and it was about the issue of religion and abortion and commingling church and state, and it has become repopularized after, unfortunately, Roe v. Wade was overturned. But for, again, this few of you that haven't seen this video, here's what took off.
These comments might be strong, but it's how I genuinely feel. I don't care that you're a Christian. I don't care what the Bible says. Like, I feel like it's a clown show, like sitting here trying to decipher what your little mythical book has to say about these very real political issues, right? I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter, in this verse. I don't care. I don't care. I don't believe in it. And I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
Well, obviously I love that, but apparently everybody loves that. So before we get to the inspiration, I'm curious, did it have any outward effect on your life? Because sometimes, like, I'll see stories about, like, oh, this person got a viral video, got 350,000 views, and she's a star now. This one got over 50 million views.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know.
It hasn't really, no, it hasn't changed my life substantively. It might have to do with the fact that aside from doing the show we do regularly, I'm a bit of a hermit and I don't really care for much attention outside of what I do for my job, right? Like, I want the stories I talk about to get attention. But no, I mean, there's been some interest in interviewing me. Other platforms have wanted to talk to me about that video. The only way that it's had like an actual impact on my life is mostly mentally, emotionally, because putting that out there and then getting the positive response from other women in return finally gives me a little bit of the validation that I think I needed, especially at a moment when Roe was reversed, to keep going. Because what we do for our jobs is not an easy job. I've been personally doing this at TYT for 15 years. And you want to feel like the hard work you're putting in is paying off in positive ways. And you look at the country and it's devolved so much in the last 15 years. And things weren't so great 15 years ago to begin with. But hearing from other women, and not just women, just other people who are so frustrated with religious doctrine dictating their lives, with specifically Christian religion dominating policy decisions that are made by our lawmakers in a country that's supposed to have a separation of church and state. Just knowing that there are people out there who see that clip and it resonates with them and they feel as fired up as I do gives me the strength to keep doing what we do for our jobs every day.
Okay, I love it. We're gonna get to the sweatshirt. We're gonna get to another video and inspiration in a second too. But also a lot of like mainstream folks shared it. Do you remember some of the names?
Alec Baldwin shared it.
Interesting.
A lot of other people who
Andy Cohen,
yes, from Bravo shared it, yeah. And I love the Housewives franchise, so
not a big deal.
So I was like, so I really like that.
Like, I saw this one. So there's like dozens of others that are in mainstream media, etc. But I vicariously, because for those of you who've never seen us before, Anna and I do a show called The Young Turks, and the conversation. This show is part of the TYT network, but Anna and I built the flagship show together, right? And we don't get a lot of positive reinforcement from mainstream media.
Mostly negative.
Yeah, we've been attacked, pretty much the entire 20 years we've been around. So did it feel a little good to get positive reinforcement from some folks in mainstream media?
I don't really care, to be honest. The only thing that felt good was that the message resonated, right? It's not about, I'm being validated or accepted by certain people. I'm gonna speak my mind. I'm gonna say what needs to be said. Nothing's gonna stop me. I'm not looking for validation. But I do think that message is important because right now we're dealing with a political party that wants to completely deny that we have a separation of church and state, that we're supposed to have constitutional protections from religious doctrine dictating our lives. I mean, you have Lauren Boebert saying she's sick of the separation of church and state. You have Charlie Kirk in a recent rant claiming that there's no constitutional protections from religion and politics, mingling the way that it has recently. And that's terrifying because just like they want to protect their Second Amendment rights and have guns available to anyone and everything, fact of the matter is our First Amendment rights matter, separation of church and state matters, freedom matters. And to me, freedom means not allowing someone else's faith and someone else's interpretation of morality, again, dictate your life and the decisions you get to make over not only your own life, but your body, right?
Yeah. I think a sad indictment actually of the rest of media that no one's ever said it before. They haven't said it like that. They haven't said it as forcefully as you did. And I think that's why it resonated, where people were like, oh, finally, somebody just said it. Like, wait, why do I have to follow your rules? I thought this was a free country. Why can't I follow my rules, right? And so, okay, so what was the inspiration behind it? Because I don't know that.
The inspiration behind that rant, and I've never told anyone about this, was you, but not in the ways that you're thinking. Okay, so every time we do a story on the show about a group of religious people who want to change policy and they want to force their religion on everyone else, Cenk inevitably, and remember I've been here for 15 years, we'll start talking about what the Bible says, right? So he'll talk about how the Bible says you shouldn't be eating shellfish, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. But it's all stuff that everyday normal Christians engage in, but never criticize. And I can't stand when you do that. And the reason why-
I'm glad to have inspired you, Anna.
You inspired me. The reason why is because, again, it doesn't matter, right? So when you give in to their framing, because they frame it as, this is what the Bible says, and the Bible should determine what our policy should be. No, the Bible should not determine what our policy should be. The Torah should not determine what the policy should be. Whatever religious doctrine you believe in doesn't get to dictate the laws that we must abide by. Because we live in a country that believes in freedom of religion, meaning there are all sorts of people of faith who believe all sorts of things. Some of those faiths conflict with one another. Sometimes they mesh well with one another. But fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter when it comes to our policies. So stop giving into their framing.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Now let's debate, okay? No, Anna, there's no question that what you're saying is true. Of course, that I'm saying, even if you thought the Bible should have any effect on our policy, and unfortunately a giant percentage of the country does, well then you should read it, and the Bible is definitely pro-abortion. So Numbers 5:11 through 31, read it. I know you'll make all sorts of excuses. Oh no, but another part of God said that there was a
no, but I'm actually interpreting that in a different way that's convenient for the argument I'm making right now. Because the fact of the matter is, religious doctrine is always up for interpretation, unless you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and you believe in the literal interpretation of the Bible.
Yeah, but a lot of people do, and unfortunately, those people are in power. Anyway, what I want to say to them is, look, you guys, you don't even believe it. You don't believe anything in the Bible. And so to the shellfish point, Well, if you eat shrimp, you eat lobster, you eat crabs or whatever, that is an abomination the same as lying with a man. Are there people going to school board meetings going, you have to take the shrimp out of the curriculum, right?
Yeah.
No, but it's because they want to hate gay people. They want to control women. So they're finding the convenient parts of the Bible, which aren't even really, a lot of the abortion part's not even in the Bible, right? And using it as a pretext. But Anna is 100% right. Even if they were right about the Bible, who cares? That would matter a lot in the Vatican, which is controlled by the Bible. That's where the Pope lives, and he's in charge of the Vatican, and that's where it is the law. Right?
Religious doctrine dictates the Vatican. Yes.
Yeah, like what's in the Quran? Well, that matters a lot in Saudi Arabia. Now it matters a lot in Afghanistan. It doesn't matter at all here in America, not because Muslims are the minority, but because it very clearly says in the Constitution, we shall not establish a religion. So I don't know what part of that is unclear. Part of it for me, Anna, is that my whole life, no one in mainstream media has said things that are super obvious. And that's what drives me crazy. And I think that's what drives the entire younger generation crazy. Like, what's wrong with these boomers? Like, why won't they say the most obvious things in the world? Because in the old days, guys, if you're younger, we only had TV and radio and newspapers, basically mainstream media. There was no Google, there was no internet. You couldn't look things up. You'd have to go to the library, you have to get microfiche. But then even when you do the microfiche, you're just looking at old mainstream media, right? And it was a monopoly on information, and they brainwashed the entire country into absurdities. And that goes exactly to Anna's point, which is, why are we having a conversation about what's in the Bible when it comes to our government? When it says we shall not establish a religion, we can't entertain this debate. There is no debate. So I think that's why the video took off, and everybody's like, finally someone said it. Now there's a second video, similar topic, that this one also resonated. In fact, it's from the same segment, right? So let's take a look at that.
They go around talking about Muslim majority countries or countries like Iran and how they treat their women there. Oh, can you believe it? The men force the women there to dress a certain way or to act a certain way. What do you think you're doing? And they pretend like they care about unborn babies' lives. There are children who are on their way here to the United States out of fear for their lives, and you support a president who believes in shooting them if they throw rocks. Okay, you don't care about life. You pretend like you do. You use it as an excuse to control the lives of women in the country. That's what it's really about, okay? Because you have to practice what you preach. The right to life doesn't end at reproductive rights, okay? There are living human beings right now that you and your party consistently go after, okay, fearmonger about, slander, and you don't care about their lives. Time and time again, you guys have proven that.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you about Democratic reaction, because so right wing, we know they're gonna get angry. They don't believe what we believe, and they're gonna find it outrageous. Like one time I said Christians did the Holocaust, and that took off in right wing media. Like, can you believe Cenk Uygur said that? It's just a fact. So like, did Muslims do it? Did Buddhists do it? No, Christians did it. And it's okay, I don't mean that all Christians are at fault. It was explained within the context. They gave the full quote in the articles, which was funny. And they're like, yeah, the people in Germany who did the Holocaust were Christian. So like, and I was in regard to, do Christians always do the right thing? I mean, this is so obvious, right? So we know what the right wing reaction is gonna be. They're gonna be outraged at everything, right? But a lot of times I feel like the Democratic reaction to strong statements that you make and we make is that hey, that's gonna offend religious voters, that's gonna offend Republicans, etc. Is that in a sense more frustrating?
I think what's frustrating is the endless fecklessness and weakness of the Democratic Party, which has failed time and time again to protect the very rights that women fought aggressively for, particularly reproductive rights in this context. But other disenfranchised groups have fought for the rights that they were able to succeed in accomplishing. And the party that purports to be the line of defense between disenfranchised groups of people and foaming at the mouth rabid conservatives somehow fails to protect those rights. Like, they continue to fail. So like, anyone who takes advice from the mainstream Democratic Party is stupid. The mainstream Democratic Party is weak, they have failed, they are ineffective. And I say that as someone who is currently a registered Democrat in the state of California, where we unfortunately do not have open primaries, and I have to pick a party if I want to vote in primaries. But obviously, if I have to choose a party in this disastrous two-party system, I have in the past sided with Democrats. But I can't think of anything that's more disappointing than the Democratic Party. So if they're gonna give me messaging advice, I will dispense of that messaging advice as quickly as humanly possible, because again, they're ineffective. They don't even know how to communicate. They don't know how to legislate. They don't know how to get a damn thing done. I want everyone to understand this, like soak this in, because this is the reality of the situation. Women in America lost their reproductive rights at a time when, for the first time ever, our vice president is a woman. Okay, if I were the first female vice president, if I was like the 5th female vice president in the United States, that ain't happening on my watch, and I would fight like hell to prevent that from happening. I get that the executive branch has limited power in this context, but the lack of passion, the lack of concern that we saw from the Democratic Party, from the White House, from Kamala Harris, this nation's first female vice president, is not only disastrous and disappointing. How do you forgive that? How do you forgive that? I can't forgive it.
So this goes to a really interesting generational divide. So Anna and I obviously share a lot of opinions. We do a show together, but I grew up under the brainwashing influence of mainstream media. You grew up less so in that context, okay? A little bit, but not as much as I did. Mm-hmm. So if you're religious, I've done your drug. I used to be religious. If you're a Republican, I've done your drug. I used to be a Republican. If you believed in mainstream media, I've definitely done your drug. I used to believe in mainstream media, so that is part of the reason why I have a zeal of the converted, and I also have an anger towards them for lying to me my whole life, right? So, for example, in this context, if we say, and certainly if I said it because I'm not a woman, so that they'll use gender identity politics, etc. But even if you said what you just said, and it said, hey, Kamala Harris, if I was in your situation, I would say, I would have done a press conference, how dare these goddamn Republicans.
I mean, isn't that a minimum press conference, yeah.
Yeah, take my rights away. You don't get to control my body, right? But if we say that, Anna, and you just basically did say that, to this day, everyone in Washington would say that's unacceptable.
I know, Jake, but who cares? Who cares? Like, you keep mentioning that.
Yeah.
You love to talk about that. Oh, everyone in Washington says this, and everyone, they're losers. They're losers. The Democratic Party is full of losers. So who cares what they say? We need to steamroll them. Okay, the Democratic Party needs to be steamrolled by progressive candidates who actually want to legislate, who actually want to govern, who actually want to protect people's rights. Because right now, this flaccid, impotent Democratic Party ain't fighting for us. All they care about, I mean, look, there was so much coverage, and it was justified. So much coverage about Donald Trump using the office of the presidency to enrich himself, to direct federal money to his personal businesses, right? But you see that happening all the time with lawmakers across the board, across both parties. You have representatives in the Democratic Party who are much more interested in trading individual stocks based on insider information that they received during their briefings than they do actually legislating and representing the people who put them in those positions of power in the first place. I'm sorry, not interested in what the Washington consensus is. No. They're losers. They're losers.
So I'll tell you why I care. And but by the way, if you like that sweatshirt, we just got that at shoptyt.com. Keep your bands off my body.
Yep.
I love it. Okay, there you go. Shoptyt.com. Wear it loud, wear it proud. So Anna, look, remember Time, Newsweek were giants, Sports Illustrated, these are all giants, right? And so now they're not. Newsweek's still around a little bit. Time, I guess, is still around. Yeah, they did one interesting story a couple of years back. Sports Illustrated, apparently Jordan Peterson couldn't finish to it, and that became
not fathomable material for Jordan Peterson.
So, but if I went on and on about goddamn Time and Newsweek and Sports Illustrated, you'd be like, what's wrong with Cenk? Can we get him a therapist, etc.? Because they're not that relevant anymore, right? Nobody's talking about Time and Newsweek. It's not influencing anyone. So the reason why I'm still obsessed with Washington Consensus is because they have a Vulcan mind lock on older Democratic primary voters.
Yeah, they got to die off.
Oof. Okay. I know.
Keeping it real, you guys are destroying the country. They provide cover for an impotent Democratic Party that allows the GOP to implement their regressive policies. You guys, you are the bane of our existence. Young women in this country, I know all you older female Democratic voters, doesn't matter for you. You're good, you're gooch, you don't have to worry about a damn thing. All of us young women are now terrified about what this means for our futures, okay? By the way, tons of women, tons of people who have all sorts of conditions like autoimmune issues, right? Can't get certain prescription drugs they need for their autoimmune issue because state lawmakers are concerned that that drug might be used to cause an abortion. This is gonna be disastrous, not just for young women, but all sorts of people across the country. And you have older Democratic voters who are like, everything's good for me. How's my stock portfolio doing? You guys are destroying the country. So I apologize if it hurts your feelings that I'm looking forward to a day when you don't have political power anymore. But I'm definitely looking forward to that day. Can't wait till you guys step aside and allow people to do the real work.
Yeah, so let me do the standard caveat, which is that some of the best progressives in the country are from the old school.
I'm not talking about progressives.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the old Democratic voters who provide cover for fecklessness and ineffective governance.
Yeah, so we're in a mortal clash, and of course I don't want him to die off, and I assume that's a rhetorical flourish on your part.
Sure, whatever gives you comfort.
Yeah, but but I do agree that I definitely want them to lose political power because they are picking conservative Democrats that agree with Republicans in every primary. And it's because they are 100% brainwashed by MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, and NPR, and other outlets too, but the mainstream media that tells them, oh, progressives wouldn't win. Oh, don't fight too hard. No, civility is the most important thing. Oh, status quo is great. No, everything's fine. Not yet, not now, no, later, many years later, decades later. Oh, Biden's not doing anything, that's great. No, there's nothing he could do. There's nothing Pelosi could do. There's nothing Schumer could do. There's nothing Biden can do. There's always nothing that anybody can do. So, believe me that I share your frustration.
Yeah, they're professional GOP enablers. That's what they really are.
What we have to figure out, and there's only a minute left here, so I don't know how we're gonna figure it out in that amount of time, but is how do we win those elections? How do we either win over those voters or defeat those voters in primaries? Because until we move establishment Democrats out of the way, they're never gonna let us get to the Republicans. They're never gonna let us effectively fight the Republicans. And so that monopoly that Washington still has on older Democratic voters is absolutely destroying the country.
It is.
Yeah, and so that's why I keep talking about goddamn Washington and what they think, right? But what you saw here and what you see with the tens of millions of people that have watched Anna's videos raging on this issue, rightfully so, is that a lot of people are on our side. So if you're in my age group, you're in or you're from the old school, or you're from anywhere, and you're still watching cable news and still think the New York Times does all the news that's fit to print and all that garbage that they spew out with their propaganda and their marketing, understand that there's a whole nother world. Like I keep saying, in that video alone, at least 58 million people have watched it. And that is 58 million people who say, goddamn right, Anna is right, and we're sick of this. Sick of it. And so if you keep telling us, keep waiting, Democrats should never fight, they should always give in to Republicans, and our answer is no deal. Then you and I are gonna fight, and we're gonna see who wins. And I got my money on Anna.
I hope so.
Yeah, because we've all had it up to here.
100%. I think I made that clear.
100%. All right, much love. Thank you for joining us, Anna.
My pleasure.
All right, and keep your bands off my body. All of our bodies.
You know, old school's pitched to me from Jank. It'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? And I go, what are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps f***ing cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong. I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times.
Yuck.
But what makes you stop right before 40? What makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the you said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m. There's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
I heard of it. I just had some in the car.
I'll tell you who I'm not f***ing, Ben Mankiewicz. Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough.
Easily.
See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Craig starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just gonna ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies.
And members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. TYT.com, join, and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
Good
John, come back.
This is where it all began for many elected progressive leaders. The Young Turks was one of the few media outlets to cover the races of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and many, many more. We know a great majority of the country is actually progressive, and TYT is here to amplify these issues so that we can have better policies that a majority of the country actually supports. We want to drive positive change, and then we've been doing that for 20 years here. That's why we're launching Canvas 2022, a campaign to get out the vote and amplify progressive candidates, the progressive agenda, and their primary races. The midterm elections are fast approaching, and we know mainstream media won't cover progressive voices, but because the TYT audience is too strong, we can make a difference in the midterm elections to help progressives get elected and make sure our priorities are heard. Support our mission to drive positive change. Visit tyt.com/canvas 2022. Field goal here. It's time to switch to music.
Do your best.
He's a little like Let's go!
Oh. No one's happy now.
Give him another try.
Oh! Wow.
This is the weirdest game. Public opinion, your opinion, has zero effect on public policy. The richest people in the country, their opinion has a direct effect.
Leslie Byrne, a Democrat from Virginia, describes that when she went to Congress, she was told by a colleague, quote, always lean to the green. And to clarify, she went on, he was not an environmentalist.
Our government actively serves the richest and the most powerful and turns its back on everyone else.
Finally, end the corruption and get money out of politics and give us back our democracy.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we've got a lot to get to today. A little foreign policy news in the first hour of the show, which I'm really looking forward to sharing with you, slash not really looking forward to, considering anything related to US foreign policy tends to be pretty disastrous. But we'll get into those details in a little bit. In the second hour, Joe Biden would just like you to know, he's looked at the polls and he thinks America is in the middle of a love affair with him. Anyone who denies that is just full of malarkey, okay? So we'll get to Biden's delusions in a little bit in the second hour, where John Iadarola will be joining me to help discuss some of these stories. We also have an awesome not only second hour, but bonus episode today for our members. We'll talk about the never-ending oppression Olympics among right-wingers who aren't really dealing with any oppression at all. And there's a man in Minnesota who committed fraud just to show the world what a big victim he is. Luckily, he got caught and he's facing charges as a result. We'll get to that in the show for our members later. So you can become a member by going to tyt.com/join, or if you're watching us on YouTube, just click on that join button and you can become a member that way. Now, with that said, why don't we get to our first story?
As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes a lot of work.
Yes, a nice coup d'etat takes a lot of work. There you have Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, admitting very casually during a conversation with Jake Tapper that he has taken part in the planning process, the orchestrating of coups, which means essentially overthrowing leaders or governments in countries across the globe. He doesn't get too specific about what he's referring to, mostly because we're dealing with someone who's interviewing him who doesn't really seem to grasp how important it is to ask a follow-up immediately. We're gonna get to all of that in just a moment, but why don't we take a look at Bolton's statements in more context? They're having a discussion about the latest January 6th hearing. During that hearing, we saw more damning evidence indicating that Donald Trump was fully aware of what was about to go down on January 6th with rioters descending on the Capitol. It was interesting to say the least, right? But he used that as an opportunity to make a point about how, well, what Trump did cannot be classified as a coup. I would know a thing or two about coups. I'm much more sophisticated. So here he is making that point.
It's also a mistake, as some people have said, including on the committee, the commentators, that somehow this was a carefully planned coup d'etat aimed at the Constitution. That's not the way Donald Trump does things. It's rambling from one half-vast idea to another, one plan that falls through and another comes up. That's what he was doing. As I say, none of it defensible. But you have to understand the nature of what the problem of Donald Trump is. He's, to use a Star Wars metaphor, a disturbance in the force. And it's not an attack on our democracy. It's Donald Trump looking out for Donald Trump. It's a once in a lifetime occurrence.
I don't know that I agree with you. To be fair, with all due respect, one doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup.
I disagree with that. As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes a lot of work, and that's not what he did.
So, does it not count as a coup if the attempt was an incompetent attempt? So it's only a coup if it's sophisticated enough in the mind of someone like John Bolton. But honestly, that to me is the secondary point, the secondary issue to get to, right? I think Bolton is completely wrong about his analysis in regard to what Donald Trump did. I think that the hearings that we've been seeing have displayed far more detail, far more evidence indicating that Donald Trump knew what was going on, was inciting the riots, both ahead of time and during the riots. I mean, you have to watch our coverage of it. You have to watch the hearings for yourselves if you haven't seen it. But to just simply minimize what the Trump camp did in the lead up to January 6th, and honestly, even after January 6th, is, in my opinion, indefensible, right? He keeps saying, oh, what Trump did is indefensible, but I wouldn't classify it as a coup because he's incompetent and I'm much more sophisticated and I would know what it's like to plan and orchestrate a coup. So let's get to that, because I think that part of the story is really, really interesting. Now, to be fair to Jake Tapper, he didn't ask a follow-up question about the coup comment immediately after Bolton made that statement. I don't know if a producer was in Tapper's ear and told him, hey, yo, maybe you want to follow up on what Bolton said about coups, maybe a little follow-up question there. I don't know what happened, but he did luckily eventually ask a follow-up question about it. Maybe we'll get more clarity about what John Bolton is referring to, so let's watch.
I do want to ask a follow-up. When we were talking about what is capable, what you need to do to be able to plan a coup, and you cited your expertise having planned coups.
I'm not going to get into the specifics, but
successful coups?
Well, I wrote about Venezuela in the book, and it turned out not to be successful. Not that we had all that much to do with it, but I saw what it took for an opposition to try and overturn an illegally elected president, and they failed. The notion that Donald Trump was half as competent as the Venezuelan opposition is laughable. But I think there's another.
I feel like there's other stuff you're not telling me, though.
I'm sure there is.
Oh, I'm sure there is, John Bolton. And unfortunately, since he didn't want to disclose more detail in regard to what other coups he took part in, or attempted coups he took part in, we're gonna have to speculate a little bit, but I've got some data that we'll get to. We'll get to some coups that were orchestrated under his watch as he was working for the State Department. But before we get to that, I just want to note that, John Bolton makes this case that US orchestrated coups in other countries where oftentimes we overthrow democratically elected leaders. He thinks that we do that. The US government does that to look out for our interests, right? Our interests meaning US citizens. It's great that we overthrow democratically elected leaders. It's great that we intervene and we overthrow a government of a foreign country because it benefits ordinary Americans. We're looking out for them. When in reality, whenever the United States orchestrates and executes a coup, they don't do it on behalf of the American people. They specifically do it on behalf of business interests within the United States. Oftentimes multinational corporations that can't stand the fact that left-wing leaders are nationalizing natural resources that these multinational corporations can take full advantage of and get rich off of. Again, these coups are not done to benefit anything or anyone other than business interests. It's always about profit. So we'll get into those details in a second. But what was amazing is that admission by Bolton did lead to some backlash, as it should. And when he was asked about that backlash, he decided to just kind of sum it all up as, well, it's a bunch of snowflakes crying. Let's watch.
The US is a world superpower, and were you surprised that some of the pickup there was about, your talk? Obviously, you've written about Venezuela a lot in your book.
Well, I think there are a lot of snowflakes out there that don't understand what you need to do to protect the United States. I'm not going to get into specifics. I did write about Venezuela in my memoir. And I think that any president that's not willing to do what it takes to protect the interests of the American people needs to have some counseling.
So there he is. First of all, calling people snowflakes when we're destroying other countries by orchestrating these coups, when we're using precious resources on those coups, when in reality we should be thinking about, hey, what can we do to actually take care of the American people who are, to be sure, suffering economically, suffering from a broken political system as well. It's not about benefiting ordinary Americans. He mentions Venezuela. That's the only thing he was specific about. And I also want to be clear that the Trump administration was trying to install someone who was not democratically elected, right? They wanted to overthrow, the government under Nicolas Maduro and replace that government with Juan Guaido, not democratically elected. The people of Venezuela have not supported him. It's just a puppet for the United States that, again, the Trump administration tried to install. But I want to be clear, the Biden administration comes into power, and that's one of the first things that Biden said, that he recognizes Juan Guaido, someone who has not been elected as leader of Venezuela, as the rightful leader of Venezuela. Okay, so this is not a partisan issue. We have seen this type of trash foreign policy with both parties. And I want to be clear on that. Now let's move on though, because I want to talk about other potential coups that Bolton was probably part of. For instance, there was a successful coup. It was short-lived, but there was a successful coup in Bolivia back in 2019, again, under Donald Trump's watch. And what we know about this is that there was this accusation by the Organization of American States, OAS, that Evo Morales had not actually been reelected as the leader of Bolivia, that the election had irregularities. There was very likely fraud involved. Now, the OAS is mostly funded by the United States, and Bolivia, especially under a leader like Evo Morales, certainly has far more leftist policies that look out for the financial well-being, the economic well-being of their people, as opposed to the profit motive of multinational corporations. And so Evo Morales and the MAS party in Bolivia was a target. And unfortunately, the OAS comes in, they claim that there was election fraud without any evidence. Then you have the US media do exactly what it's paid to do, right? Just regurgitate that talking point, regurgitate these findings by the OAS without any real evidence. And Evo Morales ends up stepping down. He goes to Mexico, he flees to Mexico. And then what happens after that? Again, this is in 2019. So very likely John Bolton was part of this garbage, right? What happens after that? Well, then a right-wing authoritarian by the name of Jeanine Áñez just decides, I'm leader. She's installed as leader of Bolivia, even though she was not elected. There was no election for her. But she comes into power, she starts brutalizing the indigenous community in Bolivia. That leads to mass protests. And at the end of the day, the Bolivian people were so strong that they were able to overcome that coup. There was a special election held, and luckily another figure from the MAS party was elected, which gives you even more evidence that, hey, turns out that Evo Morales did not commit any type of election fraud. He would have very likely won if it weren't for the OAS getting involved and alleging that there was election fraud involved. So again, Jeanine Áñez, by the way, eventually ends up getting imprisoned because of her involvement in all of this. There was analysis by the Center for Economic and Policy Research, which rejected the OAS's statistical analysis of the election of Evo Morales. They put out a report on this. There were human rights experts who also weighed in on the situation, and they concluded that Áñez's government's path to power came with irregularities. Okay, so there was some criminality in the way that they came into power, of course. And eventually she was convicted for charges committed during the political crisis. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison for this. And so, look, luckily Bolivia didn't have to deal with the same fate that Iran had to deal with as a result of the United States orchestrating a coup when its leader decided, hey, maybe we should nationalize our oil. This is in 1950 when Mohammad Mossadegh decided, no, why are we allowing business interests in other countries to get rich off of our natural resources? I'm gonna nationalize our oil. That's what he decided to do. By 1953, United States comes in and overthrows this democratically elected leader, and they installed the Shah. And now, all of a sudden, of course, you have the United States whining and crying about the religious zealotry that they see in Iran, how much of a threat Iran is under the leadership of these religious figures. We love doing this, right? We love going in, destabilizing countries. We did it in Guatemala, we did it in Iran, we do it all over the place. And then when these refugees flee these countries that we have destabilized, when they come to our border seeking refuge, seeking asylum, what do we do? What do people like John Bolton do? What do members of the Trump administration do? They cry about it. They whine about it.
And to make matters worse, to add insult to injury, they point fingers at those refugees and they make them out to be dangerous individuals that we should all be afraid of. Now, the dangerous individuals sit in the Capitol building, in the White House, in the Pentagon. What they do is scheme and try to figure out ways to do right by business interests, right? They're the ones who go in and terrorize these countries by overthrowing these governments. And John Bolton just flat out admits it. He admits it during this interview with CNN. And I don't know why there was a delayed reaction from Jake Tapper, but that was a huge moment. And I wish Jake Tapper had just the historical context necessary to challenge Bolton on this a little more. And by the way, just going back to Bolivia for 1 second. Why would we want to do or orchestrate a coup in Bolivia? Well, Elon Musk actually provided a lot of clarity on that. Now, when we're talking about electric vehicles, we need a very precious resource for that, lithium. We need lithium for that. And when it was very clear that the United States very likely engaged in orchestrating that coup in Bolivia in 2019, Elon Musk was very irritated by the fact that there was criticism toward that. And you know what he said on Twitter? We'll coup who we want. Because hey, Tesla's got to get their hands on that resource. They need that lithium for those electric vehicles. We'll coup who we want. So when we talk about state-sponsored terror, when we talk about all these shadowy, dangerous figures around the globe, those people exist, I'm not denying that. But I do think it's important to take a good hard look at what the United States has done through its foreign policy, how it has destabilized other countries, how that has led to refugee crises around the globe, and then maybe consider changing the way we approach foreign policy before we point fingers at other world leaders. I think that's an important thing to do. Recently, the Biden administration hosted the Summit of the Americas, which I attended to do some coverage at. And it was interesting because there were specific countries that were not invited. Cuba was not invited, Venezuela not invited. And when I asked one of the individuals that I interviewed, actually the US ambassador to Mexico about that, I was like, so why not? I mean, isn't this all about getting countries together, trying to move forward in a diplomatic way? And he gave me some nonsense answer. But the fact of the matter is, when you have countries that have decided, no, we're gonna nationalize our resources and we're not gonna allow multinational corporations to take advantage of us, well, there's no business deal to be made. And that entire summit was all about getting US business interests together with Latin American leaders who are willing to open up their country to be exploited by these business interests. That's what's really going on. So when John Bolton talks about these things, when he talks about how it's gonna benefit the American people, when it's about national security, I know that you guys are probably already smart enough to know it's BS, but I'm here to just really confirm that and emphasize it is BS. Finally, a few more things I wanted to add. So since Bolton joined the government under the Reagan administration in 1982, there have been more than 350 coup attempts around the world. Nearly 150 of them have been successful. Now, of those 350 plus coups, 191 occurred when Bolton held a position with the US government. That figure, however, includes coups that occurred when Bolton was serving in positions that one might assume were less coup adjacent, like serving as an assistant administrator of the US Agency for International Development, USAID, or serving as an assistant attorney general in the Justice Department. But let's take a look at what has transpired under a State Department where Bolton is an employee, right? So Bolton joined the State Department in October of 1989. There was an attempt to oust Panamanian dictator Manuel Antonio Noriega. He was removed from power following an American invasion that December. By the way, you wanna know who empowered Manuel Noriega in Panama? The United States. In fact, George H.W. Bush had been working with the homie since the 1960s. But once Noriega started to become a little too much of a liability for the United States, all of a sudden we gotta oust the guy.
We got to overthrow, we need regime change. And that's what the United States did in 1989, in December of 1989. Let's get to some more of these coups. In 1992, a coup in Afghanistan similarly led to the ouster of the country's leader, a longtime ally of the Soviet Union. There was also coup attempts in a number of other countries while Bolton served under President George H.W. Bush, including the Philippines, Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, and Romania, where they ousted the general secretary. Bolton then returned to government under Bush's son, George W. Bush. Besides the invasion of Afghanistan, perhaps the most significant coup tracked by the Klein Center's coup d'etat project was the March 2004 removal of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who was the president of Haiti at the time. Now, he blamed American actors for the coup, but other countries saw similar attempts, including the November 2003 Rose Revolution in Georgia that ousted the country's Soviet allied leader. So it is interesting, right? Oftentimes when we see these coups take place, when there is some suspicion regarding the United States orchestrating those coups, it's always when there is fears of a communist takeover, fears of a leftist leader nationalizing national resources. And again, there is a very clear reason for that. It's because when a country nationalizes their resources, the individuals who benefit and profit from those resources are the people of that country. And multinational corporations ain't having that. So they rally the troops, the US troops, and the United States government to do what it does best in most cases, which is again, overthrow these leaders to open the doors up for these business interests. Bolton admitted that in his own way. And if anyone finds that morally just wrong, if anyone has a problem with that, you're just a snowflake. You're just crying about it. Also, I don't know why we have all these refugee crises all around the world. I don't know why people are seeking refuge and asylum here in the United States. What's going on? It's all connected, guys. It's really important to pay attention to what we do in regard to foreign policy, because it does have an impact, not only on us, but on people all across the globe who don't deserve to suffer in the name of multinational corporations. All right, I'm gonna get off my, I'm gonna get off the story now. We gotta go to break. But when we come back, we have more foreign policy to get to, including Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia and his willingness to renege on a very clear promise that he made on the campaign trail. We'll be right back. I have to read this comment from I Am Sock in our member section. You can become a member by going to tyt.com/join or click on that join button. We love hearing from our members. I Am Sock writes, as a quote from Bolton, "There were hardly any death squads. My coups all had death squads. Only amateurs don't have death squads." I mean, it's just the way that he tried to present himself as this like highly intelligent and sophisticated coup orchestrator it's incredible. And look, shockingly, Tapper kind of had the right instinct in saying like, you don't have to be a genius to carry out a coup. And if you look at the details of how some of these coups were carried out, you don't really have to be a genius. But it is amazing how much of Bolton's self-importance was revealed in the context of that interview. Shai Coltrane says, "I think that Tapper didn't see or expect such a blatant admission from Bolton." Fair, look, sometimes when you're in the middle of a discussion like that, or you're doing something live, you might miss something, or you might be so shocked at what someone says that you just have to like absorb it for a minute and figure out how you want to address it. So maybe we're being a little too harsh with Tapper, but it's not in a vacuum, right? You kind of have to look at how Tapper handles most of his reporting, and more often than not, he's disappointing. Free Puerto Rico writes, I remember seeing Añez marching to the presidential palace with a giant Bible. It was absurd and infuriating. Well, she's rotting in prison now, so love to see it. I bathe in a billionaire banker's tears says the UN should bring Bolton before the International Court of Justice to answer a few questions. I agree with you on that. And by the way, when he was in the Trump administration, one of the things that he succeeded in was getting the Trump administration to completely dismiss the International Criminal Court. Gee, I wonder why. And I remember he specifically went after the head of the ICC. I forget exactly how. Yes. Do you remember, Edwin? I think they named her something that was ridiculous. Yes, okay, we'll look that up in a second. All right, I want to read a few Twitch subs. So Court for Gestures says, I disagree. I've planned a lot of coups. I mean, not here, LOL. I know, it's hilarious. Century, by the way, that's the other thing. I mean, coups are totally fine as long as they happen in other countries. I would never do it here, you know. Century 22, 3 months tier 1 with the comment, cuckoo kachoo, love it. And Edwin, did you look it up? No, okay. Dog Barker, when Bolton says protecting the American people, he only means American corporations. Corporations are people, my friend, exactly. And I wanna say thank you to our new YouTube members, including CB and Bildemrath. Thank you so much for being new members. And we gotta go. To the show. I'm Anna Kasparian, and we are going to get right into our next story. We've got a little bit of a foreign policy angle on the show today, so let's get right to it. President Joe Biden is visiting Saudi Arabia as the United States considers resuming offensive arms sales to the country. Let me just repeat that for a second. Not defensive arms to protect itself from imaginary threats. Offensive arms, meaning weapons that are used to carry out offensive military action. And I'll get to those details in a moment, but the Biden administration is discussing the possible lifting of its ban on US sales of offensive weapons to Saudi Arabia. But any final decision is expected to hinge on whether Riyadh makes progress toward ending the war in neighboring Yemen. Let's pause for a second. What? That condition kind of doesn't make any sense, right? So why would you resume sales of offensive weapons on the condition that they stop the war in Yemen? I mean, what's the point of offensive weapons? Well, let's get to that. So there are defensive weapons, right? So these are weapons specifically used to protect yourself, and they're considered defensive based on their capacity to cause harm, the distance that these types of weapons can travel to cause harm. For instance, the UK and the US have provided NLAW and Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. The NLAW can destroy a tank, but is only effective at short range between 20 to 800 meters. The Javelin also has a range of 2,000 meters, right? So that's considered defensive. It's considered a weapon that would be used to defend yourself if there is some sort of threat against your country, some sort of military threat. But it's different from offensive military weaponry. By contrast, but contrast this with the ability of MiG jets to fly hundreds of kilometers into enemy territory, giving Ukraine, for instance, the capacity to attack across its borders. This is why Poland has been cautious in its attempts to supply Ukraine's Air Force with Soviet-era MiG-29s, there is a danger that this could be seen as crossing the line into an aggressive act. So again, offensive means offensive weaponry means the country that is using the weapons very likely is using it to launch an offensive attack against another country. So the idea of just like using this condition of Yemen, I feel like is nothing more than a cover story. Like here's the PR narrative that we'll put out there so the Biden administration doesn't get the backlash that it deserves for resuming the sale of these weapons. But in reality, you think the United States really cares about whether or not Saudi Arabia is gonna end its war in Yemen? I mean, I'm sure there are some lawmakers who are concerned about that, who do want the war to end. But at the end of the day, the Biden administration wants to resume the sale of offensive weapons to Saudi Arabia because at the end of the day, the Biden administration wants Saudi Arabia to produce more what? More oil. That's what this is about. That is what this is about. So right now, Saudi Arabia has leverage because it is part of the OPEC cartel, meaning it is an oil producing country that has manipulated the cost of oil by holding back on production. I wish we were in a better place right now where we were more reliant on natural renewable energy so we wouldn't have to deal with, I don't know, Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman, who ordered the execution and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi as he was visiting an embassy over in Istanbul. But now we have Joe Biden, showing up to Saudi Arabia, considering resuming the sale of offensive weapons to this authoritarian regime in Saudi Arabia. And he's doing it specifically because he's trying to convince them to produce more oil. Now, Biden, by the way, as a presidential candidate, denounced Saudi Arabia pretty aggressively, and he did it on the debate stage. And I want to remind you of the type of language he used on the debate stage. Biden, not known for being super aggressive, but he was in this moment. Let's watch.
Khashoggi was in fact murdered and dismembered, and I believe in the order of the Crown Prince. And I would make it very clear, we were not going to in fact sell more weapons to them. We were going to in fact make them pay the price and make them in fact the pariah that they are. There's very little social redeeming value in the present government in Saudi Arabia. And I would also, as pointed out, I would end the subsidies that we have, end the sale of material to the Saudis who they're going in and murdering children and they're murdering innocent people. And so they have to be held accountable.
They have to be held accountable until we need them to produce more oil. In that case, I'll suck up to Saudi Arabia, I'll visit Saudi Arabia, I will reconsider our ban on selling offensive military weaponry to Saudi Arabia. And again, this is after he made that promise on the debate stage. This is after the Biden administration commissioned an investigation into the murder and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi, and of course found through that investigation what we already knew, that yes, Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, the Saudi crown prince, was the one who ordered that assassination, that murder. And so this is why it is a huge problem that we haven't focused more on getting the United States off of our dependence on fossil fuels. Because we have engaged in so many wars over oil. We have overthrown leaders in other countries. We have overthrown governments in other countries in order to ensure that we have access to oil. It has caused a lot of damage around the world. And the fact that the Biden administration, along with, by the way, lawmakers across the board, both Democrats and Republicans, they have resisted the efforts to shift toward renewable energy. And to be sure, that is the long-term goal. That is something that is worth continuing the fight over. But there is something that Biden could do in the short term that he's unwilling to do, because there are Americans suffering right now as a result of our reliance on oil. They're feeling it at the gas pump. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what Biden can do. But I do want to just quickly get into how Biden is trying to provide cover for what's about to go down with Saudi Arabia, which is again, friendlier relations with people who are brutal to their own, let's be clear about that, but more importantly, who killed a Washington Post journalist and dismembered him. Like, we were critical of Donald Trump when he was providing cover for Mohammed bin Salman. Biden deserves the same treatment if he's gonna engage in the same actions. Now, Biden wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, and it's titled, "Why I'm Going to Saudi Arabia." Why am I going to Saudi Arabia? Okay, tell us, Joey B, why are you going over there? "I'll travel to the Middle East to start a new and more promising chapter of America's engagement there. This trip comes at a vital time for the region, and it will advance important American interests." Ooh, important American interests. What are those interests? And to be honest, Biden is halfway candid here, because he does admit its energy resources are vital for mitigating the impact on global supplies of Russia's war in Ukraine. And a region that's coming together through diplomacy and cooperation, rather than coming apart through conflict, is less likely to give rise to violent extremism that threatens our homeland, or new wars that could place new burdens on US military forces and their families. Now, he doesn't get into how he's very likely to resume the sale of offensive weapons to Saudi Arabia. But I'm really enjoying this whole war is peace Orwellian messaging in Biden's op-ed here. I'm gonna hit up the homies over in Saudi Arabia, because that means, more peace. More peace, everybody. I'm looking out for you. Now, he also wants to strengthen the alliance between Israel and Saudi Arabia to counter Iran, which, by the way, what's up with the Iran nuclear deal? Biden said that he was gonna re-enter the Iran nuclear deal, which was an incredibly important thing to do. Iran nuclear deal ensured that Iran would not develop nuclear weapons. There were safeguards in place. There were members of the international community who were able to go into Iran and ensure that Iran was following through with its side of the deal. Trump comes in, he rips up the Iran nuclear deal. Biden says he's gonna re-enter it, hasn't re-entered it. Instead, he talks about strengthening the alliance between Israel and Saudi Arabia to counter Iran, which sounds like you're taking a more combative approach here, to be clear, right? By the way, Iran has been crippled by our economic sanctions. Sanctions that were much more harsh as soon as Donald Trump decided to re-implement them after tearing up the Iran nuclear deal. It's just a complete mess. So what could Biden do? Because since we can't shift to renewable energies fast enough, and people are really feeling the pain at the gas pump, you could do what Norway did. You can nationalize our fossil fuels. You can nationalize the energy that we're so reliant on. And then we would have a little more control over the pricing. And what I mean by that is, since you have corporations controlling the oil and the natural gas in this country, they get to decide what to do with it, including selling it to the highest bidder. You have all these so-called OPEC plus countries producing oil, and they can manipulate that by withholding production, right? And you see that happening with Saudi Arabia. But more importantly, if the United States decides, no, this is a natural resource that should belong to the people of the United States, well, then the US government stops subsidizing the oil companies. The US government also ensures that the people of the United States get to benefit and profit from this natural resource instead of these private companies. But is Biden willing to do that? I mean, we have overthrown democratically elected leaders in other countries because they had the audacity to nationalize their oil. We did it in Iran in 1953. We've tried to do it in Venezuela. So there's no way in hell Biden would do that. But there is a model that works, a solution for the short term. We are the top oil and natural gas producing country in the world. When the right wing tells you that we have scaled back on our production of these fossil fuels, they're lying to you. #1 country in the world when it comes to producing these resources. But they're not controlled by us. They're not controlled by the American people. We provide tax breaks and subsidies for these corporations, but we don't benefit from them. They price gouge us. And of course, they export these natural resources to other countries. So when we're feeling the pain at the pump, it's because of this privatized model that ensures that a small group of people benefit from these natural resources, price gouge the American people and people around the world when it comes to these natural resources. They have the ability to manipulate the value and the price of these resources. It's a system that puts us at a significant disadvantage. But Norway figured out how to do it right. Is Biden willing to do it? Of course not. Of course not. Anyway, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about a pretty disgusting incident that happened at a Walgreens when a married woman was just trying to buy some condoms. We've got that story and more. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
Joey, baby, you blew it.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Peter Hamby writes in our super chats and says, global overthrows, plans to be king of the world, cuckoo to no end. That was a beautiful poem. Thank you, Peter. By the way, I'm curious. I was listening to Left, Right, and Center, which is like a podcast. Don't listen to it often these days, but Baratunde Thurston was on and he mentioned a colleague named Peter Hamby. And I was like, is it that Peter Hamby? So I'm curious if that was you. Let us know. Tronald Massive Dumps writes in and says, they knew full well Trump was planning a coup in advance and did nothing while people died. Talk about the dirty and the stinky of politics. Merrick Garland, where are you? Lock them up. The Merrick Garland point is an important one. And if these goons get away with what they did, it sends a very loud message to any other administration that refuses to engage in a peaceful transition of power. Because like, what's the worst that could happen, right? The worst that could happen is it doesn't work. It's not like you're gonna face any charges for it. It's unbelievable. All right, Raul Melendez writes in and says, today's my birthday, can you give me a shout out? Happy birthday, Raul, super exciting. Another cancer baby, as a cancer myself, I congratulate you. We're great people, I think, I hope. LJ Wombology says, snowflakes because we don't like free market fanatics and military juntas disappearing innocent people. Homeboy is killing my Ice Cream Wednesday vibe. I feel you, Wombology, I feel you. Cassandra writes in and says, I am the walrus, cuckoo cachoo. That a few people have written that in. Is that a thing? Is it a meme that I'm missing? Oh, got it. Oh, that's right, okay. And then we've got BO who says, been away but laughed so hard, replaying Anna using my mom's old favorite expression, champagne taste on a beer budget last week. Keep it up, we need you. I don't remember using that, but sometimes I do use old sayings out of nowhere. Burrito Bandito in our member section says, Mohammed bin Salman is a fishy little character, badum ching. And Tina says, the US produces enough oil, this is what I was saying, you're right. Enough oil, in fact, the US exports home pushed oil. Oil production needs to be nationalized and companies should be forced to keep supplies here and set price controls and aggressively more toward renewable energy. Exactly. I'm guessing you put that comment in before I made that point on the show, but you're exactly right about that. All right, we've got a lot more news to get to, so let's get back to the show. We'll see you there. Welcome back to the show. I want to get to some domestic stuff because we're already starting to see the ramifications of the reversal of Roe. And a lot of these religious zealots feel more emboldened now than ever before. And I want to share the story of Jessica Pence. Let's discuss what she experienced during a vacation in Wisconsin. A Walgreens employee refused to sell a married woman a box of condoms, citing his religious beliefs in denying the sale. Now, Jessica Pence and her husband Nate decided to vacation in Wisconsin for the 4th of July weekend. I guess that was mistake number one. But nonetheless, they're in Wisconsin. It's a married couple. She forgot to pack some condoms, okay? It's vacation time, a little loving. You don't want to get pregnant, totally get it. But she deals with this unsavory Walgreens employee. She'd forgotten her oral contraceptives back home in Minneapolis. So they pulled up to a drugstore in Hayward and she headed inside to pick up a box of condoms and some other items. Oh, I can't sell those to you, she remembers the clerk named John telling her as she stepped up to the register with her purchases. So she was confused. She's like, was the register broken? Like, what's going on? Confused, she gestured to the aisle where she picked up the box. Maybe John thought she'd carried in merchandise from another retailer into the Walgreens? That would have made more sense than his actual explanation. Quote, well, we can sell that to you, he clarified, but I will not because of my faith. I told him, that's none of your business. He said, well, I'm sorry, this is what my faith demands. And she responded, I think accurately, by saying, you're not sorry, she remembers telling him, as the line of customers backed up behind her. Now, eventually, a manager was called, and the manager, like this blows my mind. The manager comes, the cashier, John, who's refusing to sell the box of condoms to a married woman, demands that he gets logged out of the register. So he's not in any way even digitally connected to the sale of the condoms. Manager does it, sells, is able to do the transaction. The woman is able to get the condoms. But it is outrageous because if you don't want to see blood, maybe don't be a surgeon. If you don't want to if your faith is somehow getting in the way of you being able to do your job, then maybe you should consider another job. That goes for the pharmacists who moralize about birth control and refuse to dispense birth control to women who have a prescription for it. You don't want, if your faith makes your job impossible to do another job. Go be a priest somewhere. Go be a nun somewhere. Go do missionary work. I don't know, I don't even care. But if your job is to be a cashier at a Walgreens, you don't get to pick and choose what transactions you will carry out. This is a married woman who's just trying to buy a box of condoms, which By the way, let's just address what condoms are used for. Yes, it is a preventative measure if you are trying to avoid unwanted pregnancies. That's definitely one of its uses. It's also used to stop the spread of diseases. So I don't know what John's religion is exactly, but he believes in a religion that's pro-disease. Step down, resign. This is not the job for you. What's even more infuriating though, is that Walgreens decided to release a statement backing up their employee. Like, these companies never back up their employees, ever, ever. They'll throw their employees under the bus for anything. They don't want to pay their employees a decent wage. They don't want to take care of their employees with decent benefits. But this is when they step in like, no, we're looking out for our employee who refuses to do his job because his alleged religion prevents him from being able to sell condoms to a married woman. Okay. So they released a statement saying, quote, our company policy allows team members to step away from completing a transaction to which they have a moral objection and refer the transaction to a fellow team member or manager who will complete the customer's request. But what happens if store's packed? There's no one else available to carry out the transaction. If there is a core element of that person's job that the individual is unable to carry out because of their faith, how does it make sense for that person to be employed doing that work? Now, I think this is very different from, let's say, I remember there was a story years ago, a case involving an employee at Abercrombie & Fitch, a woman who wears a headdress, worked there. And Abercrombie & Fitch had some sort of, not a uniform, but they had a dress code, and they demanded that she take her headdress off. Now, this woman wearing a headdress doesn't prevent her from doing her job. She's just wearing an item on her head that they don't like. But that doesn't in any way stop her or prevent her from doing the job she was hired to do. That actually made its way through the courts. The courts sided with her. She was able to continue wearing the headdress. But in this particular case, or in the case of a pharmacy refusing to dispense birth control to someone who has a prescription for it, they are refusing to do a core part of their job. So don't do that job, resign, find something else. And guess what? This isn't the only incident. There was a recent video posted by a TikToker by the name of Abigail Martin. And she had a very similar experience at a Walgreens, not with condoms, in this case with oral birth control. Let's hear what happened.
I don't want to be biased against any religion, but the lady that was helping me was older. She was one of the only people working there. They weren't busy. And she had 2 crosses, not one, but 2 crosses hanging around her neck. And when I told her what I was there for, my birth control, she looks me up and down and goes, like, excuse me? She then says, yeah, we're not gonna refill that prescription. You need to call your provider. And I said, you won't refill it or you can't refill it. And she goes, you just need to call your provider. So that's what I do. Then I get a message saying that it's delayed now, that I could get it, but now it's delayed. And then I get a message saying it's out of stock. What is it? So I call Walgreens again. The amazing lady who helped me this time was great. She said, I don't know why we haven't refilled this for you. You have 4 more refills left and your provider called approving it. I'm gonna refill this for you, but would you mind telling me who helped you last time? I was intrigued, so I told her and I said, could I ask why? She goes, I know exactly who you're talking about and we've been having this problem for the last 2 weeks. They've been having a problem with women not being able to get their birth control for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, that Walgreens employee should be fired. I also think it's problematic that these major corporations like Walgreens and CVS are starting to become, the only pharmacies you can go to get your prescription drugs. A lot of these smaller pharmacies are just being destroyed by the monopolistic nature of these big chains like Walgreens and CVS. So there's no easy solution if we start dealing with this prevalence of Walmart not Walmart, Walgreens employees, or even Walmart, they have pharmacies as well. Like basically saying, no, I'm not gonna do my job. I'm gonna stand in between you and the healthcare you need. I'm gonna stand in between you and the medicine, the drugs, whatever it is that you need because religion. Let me tell you something about religion, okay? You should be able to practice your religion, but your religion should not cause harm onto others. That's the rule. You want to believe whatever you want to believe, right? You're a person of faith, awesome. Awesome, religious liberty is important because faith is a huge part of a lot of people's lives. But if you believe in a particular religious doctrine, go ahead and follow that religious doctrine and everything that it entails. Do it, more power to you. But what frustrates me beyond belief is that everyone else has to be either demonized, victimized, brutalized, whatever it is, based on whatever religious belief an individual has. My faith prevents me from just being a decent human being and selling you a box of condoms as a married woman. By the way, who knows what she needs the box of condoms for, right? Maybe she's trying to prevent pregnancy. Maybe her husband has some sort of illness or some, I don't know. But it's none of his business. If you can't do your job because your religious beliefs prevent you from doing your job, you should be fired. You need to find another line of work. Step down, resign, it's over. But we don't live in that world. We now live in a world where you have all of these zealots who are emboldened by what the Supreme Court has done in reversing Roe. And it's not just about the reversal of Roe. It's about Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion, where he of course agrees with the reversal of Roe. I mean, come on, why not? Okay, but he felt the need to write a separate opinion to target previous Supreme Court rulings that actually valued the privacy that married couples have in their sex lives, because he's a creep. These people are creeps. As Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas joined the majority in erasing abortion rights for half the country, he revisited his shopping list of other demonstrably erroneous precedents the court could tackle next. He included the 1965 Griswold v. Connecticut ruling that guaranteed married couples a right to privacy in their bedrooms. No, including the right to buy contraception. That was what the case was about. But no, we can't have that. Clarence Thomas wants to know whether you and your partner are having protected sex. You can't be having protected sex. Clarence Thomas won't have it. Clarence Thomas sitting there in the Supreme Court thinking about whether or not people are engaging in oral or anal sex. Like the disgusting creep that he is, Mr. Pubic Hair on a Coke can, disgusting. These people are perverts. It is none of their business. Again, you're a person of faith, you have a problem with condoms, have at it. Do whatever you want to do. You don't get to dictate whether or not other people should have access to birth control, should have access to condoms, whether or not they use condoms, whether or not they engage in oral sex, whether or not they engage in sodomy. It doesn't matter. It's none of your business. I mean, it's hilarious that we pretend like we support and value liberty in this country when we have the most powerful people in government, including within our judicial system, talking about banning certain sexual acts in the bedroom. Again, none of your business, and why are you thinking about this? This country is a disgrace. It's a disgrace because the left has sat by, and I'm talking about elected lawmakers. They have just taken all of our freedoms for granted, things that people had fought for aggressively and had accomplished. We all took it for granted, we just did. And over the last 50 years, we've had religious zealots doing whatever it took to chip away at our liberties, chip away at our freedoms, chip away at our privacy, chip away at our civil liberties. And here we are. This is the culmination of that 50-year one-sided battle. And I say one-sided because one side sat by and thought, no, everything's great. Everything's gonna just keep moving toward progress. It didn't. Because whether we like it or not, we have people in this country who don't love our Constitution, they don't love freedom, they don't love the separation of church and state. They want to control everything you do in your personal life. That is what the abortion debate is about. It's always been about that. And that's what this is about. A weird, power-hungry boy named John who wants to tell a married woman that she can't use a condom when she has sex with her husband. It's disgusting. I'm not having it. We need to fight back aggressively against this garbage. And the fact that Walgreens stood up for that? What about your other employees? I hope you stand up for them when they decide they don't want to do their jobs, but they won't. I'm sure if they turn down a mandatory shift or some sort of, a mandatory overtime shift, if they turn that down, I'm sure they'll get fired for that. It's unbelievable. Anyway, we gotta take a break, unfortunately. So let's do that. When we come back, we've got more news for you, and hopefully I'll pick up the pace and get through more stories. We'll be right back.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you gotta force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I've seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he's the original Bernie Sanders. If you wanna know how we're gonna win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Harkson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
But.
Elon.
But.
Elon.
But.
Ice cream.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. John, Dragon Daddy, host of Damage Report, a good friend of the main show, host of the main show oftentimes.
Sometimes. Usually friend, sometimes host. It's complicated.
It is, but it's a good relationship.
Yeah. Also of the Dragon Squad, which just hit 2 years, the 2-year anniversary, which is why I'm rocking the new Gold Dragon, available at Shop TYT. The Gold Dragon, as everyone knows, is the dragon of wisdom and justice, the pursuit of justice. So seems appropriate for progressives.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
That's great. All right, well, I wanted to read a few comments from members of our Twitch community, and you can become a member of our Twitch community by going to twitch.tv/TYT. You can actually use your Prime membership to get a free subscription to our Twitch channel, which is pretty cool.
Free.
Depressed Progressive says, I wonder if he, meaning the employee at Walgreens, would have sold the husband condoms. I don't know if you saw that story.
I didn't see that one, no.
Yeah, married woman goes in to buy condoms during her trip in Wisconsin, and John, the cashier, refuses to sell the condoms to the woman. Rune Doggy.
Why was the woman by herself and why did she have money?
We should really reconsider that. Did she?
Wait, was she acting like it was her own money? Clearly it had been given to her by some male nearby.
Clearly. Rune Doggy, 25 months, that's a lot. That's more than 2 years, Prime.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Thank you, Anna, for everything you do to help us stay informed and sane during these trying times. And you gifted us up, thank you so much for that. Just want to apologize to our astronomer and astronomer adjacent community for my commentary on space.
I've seen posts about that actually.
Oh no, don't tell me about the posts.
Oh my God, yeah.
People got heated, man. Look, we all have different interests. I'm not against it. I'm not saying we should ban space exploration. I'm just saying, like, I personally don't care about that as much.
Well, I care, but I was maybe a bit less enthused about the new photos than a lot of people expected I would be, considering I'm a massive nerd.
Oh my God, I'm so happy, John.
I mean, I love it compared to her. I love it way more than her, so don't tweet me or anything. She hates space. She doesn't even know what a Vulcan is.
He hates it. He was a disappointment.
No, I liked it, but like, they're better photos, okay? Like you didn't find an alien puppy or something. Like I'm just saying, maybe if you zoom in on the photos, there is an alien puppy. We'll get to zooming. Come on.
The point is, apologies for anyone who feels offended over my tepid response to those images. Someone felt the need to go on my Instagram account just to put a comment about how he had been a fan since 2016. But my comments about the latest space exploration story means that I have jumped the shark and he is no longer a fan. And
that's gotta be a joke.
No, it's not a joke. He was very serious. But anyway.
I like what you say about income inequality and all that, but the black hole thing, it's a bridge too far. Come on.
So. People get really heated over space, you know?
Yeah, which is weird because it's so cold.
All right, let's get to our next story. Something I wanted to talk to you guys about yesterday, didn't have time, but we're doing it today. Let's talk about the Uber files. The Guardian has released what's being referred to as the Uber files, a massive leak. They call them dumps, big dumps, as Trump would say, that reveals a long history of, wouldn't you know, corruption. Not only corruption, lies and illegal maneuvers as well. So let's get into it. What exactly did they uncover through the Uber files? Well, the Guardian obtained these files from Mark McGann, who's a former Uber chief lobbyist, so he knows a thing or two about Uber and some of their lobbying efforts in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And he says, quote, I regret being part of a group of people which massaged the facts to earn the trust of drivers, of consumers, and of political elites. I should have shown more common sense and pushed harder to stop the craziness. Now remember, he was a lobbyist for Uber in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And so when we think about corporations and the corruption they engage in the context of the United States, that's called Tuesday. Like, it's the most common thing ever. This story barely got any attention in the United States because this is just business as usual in the United States, but it's a problem. And the people who suffer the most from this problem are, of course, those working in competing companies, taxi cab drivers, and also the employees for Uber. So the files, which span from 2013 to 2017, includes more than 83,000 emails, messages, and WhatsApp messages. So let's dive in. What do we know? First, the leaks shed light on Uber's business model. Their whole plan, of course, is to undercut the established taxi and cab industry, to put pressure on governments to essentially rewrite laws to help pave the way for this app-based gig work to just exist in a more friendly environment, okay? So in a bid to quell the fierce backlash against the company and win changes to taxi and labor laws, Uber planned to spend an extraordinary $90 million in 2016 on lobbying and public relations, and that's according to one of the documents. Uber also paid academics. This is very Koch brothers-ish, okay? They paid academics to publish favorable research, which is why whenever people say like, oh, this study said this and that study said that, it's really important to look into who paid for the study, who commissioned the study.
Yeah.
Now, one of the first deals sealed by Uber with top academics was with Professor Alan Kruger at Princeton University in the United States in 2015. He had been Barack Obama's chief economic advisor and was famous as an authority on raising the legal minimum wage. So he held particular influence when it came to advocating for Uber's impact on employment. And the Uber files reveal for the first time that he was paid about $100,000 for a study that was widely quoted in support of Uber as a creator of good jobs, precisely because it operated outside the rules. Internal Uber emails note that he was helpful with the press. I'm sure he was. John, I remember covering climate denial papers that had been funded by the Koch brothers. And these papers were published by university professors and all of that. So when I saw that element of the story, I immediately thought of you.
Yeah, you definitely see it with climate change. You see it with a lot of nutrition stuff too.
Yes.
Cigarettes and all sorts of stuff like that. This is just one of the tools that they use, amongst many. And one of the longstanding things that we're supposed to do here at TYT is make sure that people know about these. I know we're gonna get into a lot of more aspects of them being perfectly willing to expose their drivers like actively to violence as a technique to win over foreign governments. And we know for a long time that they didn't seem to give a damn about the fact that their own drivers or riders were getting assaulted and or raped. There's a lot of issues with them. And we shouldn't be too surprised by this. I'm actually disappointed myself because if you were to rewind to, I don't know, like 2015 or earlier, I probably would have had a lot of nice things to say about Uber. It seemed like, okay, well, you had this entrenched taxi thing in a lot of cities, which had a lot of its own problems because it had been around for so long. And Uber's coming in doing all this lobbying, but it's not like the taxi companies didn't do that for decades. And so, maybe this is a bit more freeing. Maybe this will allow people to pick up a little bit of extra work. But it's still a corporation. And so, best case scenario, it generates an interesting Hulu documentary a few years later. Like that's what we have to remember. I probably, if you were to flash back to maybe like 2013, I probably would have had nice things to say about Tesla and maybe even Elon Musk. But we have to remind ourselves, these are corporations, they're led by CEOs. Stop calling them visionaries and geniuses. They're rich a-holes. That's what they are, and they want more money. There are no good corporations except maybe Ben and Jerry's. I don't know at this point, like, can you name another genuinely good corporation or genuinely good CEO? If you can, just wait. Okay, and they will remind you of who they are and who they're serving.
So look, you're making such an important point, and I want to just like, let's just sit here for a moment and like take it in, because what you're saying is right. And I want people to think about what John is saying every time they're lured, they're seduced by the Mark Cubans of the world, right? Because Mark Cuban and his online pharmacy, I see it as the early days of Uber, where I agree with you, John. I also had positive things to say about Uber because we didn't know that what was actually going on was that you have these investors who are heavily subsidizing the cost of those rides, right? To keep the cost down, it'll be a cheap ride that does what? I mean, it becomes a very fierce competitor for taxi cab drivers. And they wanted to monopolize the market. And as soon as they got rid of the competition, they would stop subsidizing the rides and the prices would explode. And that's already happened, by the way.
Yeah.
We're seeing how expensive it is to take an Uber, and it's like, But
I've effectively given up like
I don't
3
take
years
Ubers.
ago.
No,
there was a
not
period.
interested.
And it would almost be acceptable if, okay, they were really screwing over their drivers during the subsidized days when the price was low, and now it's really high, and the drivers are still being screwed over. How does that work? You're charging way more, and they're still screwed.
The drivers never mattered to Uber. I mean, they've been working on moving toward driverless vehicles from the very beginning because the cost of labor is the #1 expense that these corporations want to minimize or get rid of entirely.
Well, and the damage to their cars, but of course that's offloaded onto the drivers.
That's the other thing, exactly. All the costs have shifted from the corporation to the employees, the drivers. And in this case, the drivers have to provide the car, the drivers have to make the repairs on the car, the gas money, all of that. Okay, but let's put that aside. Let's go back to Mark Cuban real quick. So Mark Cuban's online pharmacy at this moment is offering much lower prices for certain pharmaceutical drugs. But remember, it's not about whether Mark Cuban's a good guy or a bad guy. That doesn't matter. Everything is based on incentives and disincentives. So Mark Cuban's online pharmacy has venture capitalists behind it, okay? Investors. What do investors do? They invest money in these ventures hoping to get a what?
Philanthropic effort going?
A return on investment. A return on investment.
To create a better world?
So guys, it's not that I think I don't know if Mark Cuban's a good guy or bad guy. I don't care. I'm not analyzing people. I'm analyzing systems, okay? So in this case, the system is like the way the system works makes this whole online pharmacy situation very predictable. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say. Just a few more things I want to mention. The files also reveal Uber's horrifying response to taxi driver protests across Europe in 2016, including one insane quote from a former Uber CEO, Travis Kalanick. So amid taxi strikes and riots in Paris, Kalanick ordered French executives to retaliate by encouraging Uber drivers to stage a counter-protest with mass civil disobedience, warned that doing so risked putting Uber drivers at risk of attacks from extreme right thugs who had infiltrated the taxi protests and were spoiling for a fight. Kalanick appeared to urge his team to press ahead regardless. I think it's worth it, he said. Violence guarantees success. Nah.
Then get out there and put your skull in the path of the fist.
Oh, he would never do that. There's a lot that's been uncovered through these Uber files. We don't have as much time as I wish we did to get into all the details, but I highly recommend you guys read about it. And again, it's not unique to Uber. It's important to understand these files and this investigation reveals what the motivations are for these types of companies. Profit over people, provide a return on investment for your shareholders or for your investors. That is what drives this whole system.
Yeah.
And people's livelihoods, people's well-being, none of that matters. Profit over people, that's the way this works.
Yep.
All right, let's get to, I'm doing one more story, I don't care. We'll do the break late, okay?
Whoa.
Let's get to it.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who don't want you to run again?
They want me to run.
2/3 say they don't.
Read the polls. Read the polls, Jack. You guys are all the same. That poll showed that 92% of Democrats, if I ran, would vote for me.
A majority of Democrats say they don't want you to run again in 2024.
92% said if I did, they'd vote for me.
That's Biden justifying his pretty disastrous presidency and his mishandling of many issues. The one that really stands out to me recently is his response to the reversal of Roe, which was to strike a deal with Mitch McConnell to install an anti-abortion right-wing judge to a lifetime federal judgeship in Kentucky. Yeah, people not so happy with Joe Biden these days, but nonetheless, he thinks, no, Jack, everyone loves me. Everyone would totally vote for me. And there's a little bit of truth, by the way, in what he said. But before we get to that, I want to point to the malarkey, because there's a lot.
He's nothing but malarkey.
Nothing but malarkey.
He's a giant jar of malarkey.
Biden is a giant jar of malarkey.
Now, before I get to the receipts, and we should get to the polling, because the polling is not good for Biden. John, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, and I just wanted to talk a bit about that intro. No, that was really funny. Have you had that before? Is that new?
That we just rolled it out.
Okay, I do like it. That's pretty cool. I hope he delivers the malarkey.
Welcome to the premiere, friends.
Yeah, so what you saw from Biden, I have a couple thoughts. One, like back off, dude. Like it felt like he was getting super close to the camera. Grandpa, settle down. But the more important point is, what you got from him is marginally better than what Trump would have done in this exact same situation. So Trump would have just said, I'm at 96%. In what poll? When? Nowhere, because it doesn't exist. He'd just make it up. For Biden, the 92% that he cited, according to this poll, is accurate. If he's the nominee, 92% would vote for him. So he's not lying, except that he's denying the premise of the question, which is, yes, they would vote for you if they're stuck with you as the candidate. The larger point is they don't want to be stuck with you as a candidate, and he has no answer for that.
Yeah.
And I sort of get it. Like, yeah, that doesn't feel good, but you could do something about this. It's a much more interesting conversation.
Well, I think the Democratic electorate can do something about it, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, let's actually get to the specific details of that poll. We covered it earlier this week, but the poll found that most Democrats do not want Biden to run in 2024. With the country gripped by a pervasive sense of pessimism, the president is hemorrhaging support. So 64% of Democratic voters say they would prefer a new standard bearer in the 2024 presidential campaign, according to this New York Times Siena College poll, as voters nationwide have soured on his leadership, giving him a meager 33% job approval rating. Get a load of that, Jack. Something you should consider. Now, he put his blinders on when it came to that portion of the poll. And what he was referring to when he cited 92% is that when push comes to shove, when there's no other choice, the Democratic base, the Democratic electorate will vote for Biden.
Yeah.
And what that does is it empowers terrible Democrats to keep being terrible, because they know that there isn't going to be any real consequence for being terrible, right? So like, I know they specifically mentioned Trump, and Democratic voters are particularly terrified of Donald Trump. I get it. But when you preemptively let a terrible Democratic politician know, we don't like you, but we really don't like Trump, so we'll vote for you anyway, without pushing him to do better, that he's not gonna do better. And I see so many of these people on Twitter. Hal Sparks, failed comedian, he's a good example of that. Doesn't matter. I mean, look, Joe Biden can release a sex tape with Donald Trump, and Hal Sparks will be like, but Biden's great, and anyone who criticizes him is pro-MAGA. Anna's pro-MAGA because she's very upset about a anti-choice religious zealot getting a lifetime appointment as a federal judge. Anna's the bad guy. Anna's the bad guy. Anna's the bad guy. No, Anna's not the bad guy. You're the bad guy. Enabling failure in the Democratic Party, failure that empowers the GOP. No, you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not the bad guy.
No, but like that's
not for that reason anyway.
So yeah, so this poll shows Democratic misgivings about Biden seem to mostly melt away when presented with a choice between him and Trump. 92% of Democrats said they would stick with Biden.
Yes, yeah, sure. Which is one of the reasons why progressives think it's so important to fight in primaries and to have primaries. Because sure, our country is split between two parties. It puts people in a difficult position. So we can predict relatively well what'll happen once we get to the general election. So give them the best choice possible, but even that doesn't say exactly what Biden would have you believe. So if he is the nominee, then sure, maybe 92% of registered Democrats would vote for him. But wouldn't you like to inspire more people to register to be Democrats? And where exactly? Like, which groups? Which groups are you losing? Like, you can dive, into the demographic splits and all that. Like, it is not simply that he is beloved by the vast majority of the party. Don't put people in a position where they have to begrudgingly support a person. Because
they love doing that.
That means they're not gonna talk you up. They're probably not gonna donate money. Some of them will intend to vote for you, but when it comes to the actual day, well, I'm not excited. I'm feeling kind of apathetic. What's the difference really? Why put people in that position?
Yeah, I mean, but they do it all the time. And what I can't understand, because it seems clear to me that Biden wants to run again. He wants to run for re-election.
Why does he want to
Why?
run again? Why?
You don't seem to even enjoy the job. You don't really want to accomplish or fight for anything. So why? Why? Like what? He ran promising that he would not seek re-election. He was just gonna be president for one term if he wins. And then of course he reneged on that because as soon as they get a little taste of that power, they want more. They want more of it. They don't want to give it up. So, like, I know it's gonna come across as ageist. I don't mean to be ageist. He is not fit to be the president of the United States. He is too old, he is. And it's not just about the fact he's old, it's about how his age is showing in his performance of president of the United States. He's barely got any energy. When he speaks, it's not just about the fact he has a stutter. I know he has a stutter. I know he's overcome it, but sometimes it bleeds through in his speech. It's more than that. He read portions of the teleprompter that he wasn't supposed to read out loud, that were just supposed to give him direction. He doesn't even know Javier Becerra's name. He keeps saying Javier Baccaria. Like, you're asleep at the wheel, and this is not the time where Democratic voters need a president who is asleep at the wheel, especially as our rights are being stripped away from us. So like, it's not just about his age, it's about his age showing.
I don't even think the age is necessarily a big part of it. I mean,
I think
there are a lot of other centrist Democrats that would be the same thing Biden would be in office right now. They are effectively just a big rock in the Oval Office, just sitting there stopping things from happening. That's what they are.
That's what their whole role is. That's what their whole purpose is. That's the reason why the mainstream Democratic Party rallies in support for them.
Well, I'm just saying, if Biden was 6 years younger, I don't think he would be vigorously fighting for the cancellation of student loan debt.
No, I agree with you on that. Biden is who he is, but the fact that he is the age he is, and it seems to also have an impact on his energy, like to the point where he's MIA when serious things happen. Like, why do you want to run again?
I don't know.
Why?
I don't know.
What are you doing? What are we doing here?
I don't know why he wants to be president. You should know. You should know before they become president. We should definitely know while they're president. Like, I can make a case for Trump. I mean, he certainly wasted much of the opportunity, but he liked the pomp and circumstance. With Biden, I honestly don't know why he wants to be president. And it sucks that he would potentially block a better, more qualified person from holding that spot.
Let's just go to the final graphic here, because this is a list put together by our team about things that he promised but failed to do. Remember, he promised $2,000 COVID stimulus checks. He didn't deliver on that, it was $1,400. But that's one of the smaller things. Didn't pass the $15 an hour minimum wage. He didn't take any meaningful action on climate change. Did not make the child tax credit permanent. No universal pre-K. Did not protect reproductive rights. Let's come back for a second. He didn't pass the PRO Act. It goes on and on and on and on, right? And of course, there's always a billion excuses. Oh, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. He didn't even try, that's the problem. He didn't fight for it. And he's still using complimentary language toward people like Kyrsten Sinema, who stood in the way of passing what he claims to be his agenda. So you didn't fight for it because you didn't care about it. You don't care about delivering for the people who did the work to get you elected. So why do you want to do this? What's the point? God, I just wish Democratic leadership would step aside and allow others to lead. People who actually want to lead, people who actually want to deliver for their voters, but they won't do it. They're too hungry for power. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Steve Bannon in leaked audio planning a coup. We've got that and more coming right up.
Read the polls. Read the polls, Jack.
You blew it.
Welcome back to our social break. Lots of super chats, so I'll do a quick round of comments here. SOS writes, the left needs to be armed so we can be ready. Some people were uncomfortable with my comments on that. You don't have to buy a gun, you don't have to shoot a gun, you don't have to use a gun if you are uncomfortable with it. I think responsible gun ownership on the left is appealing to me. That's all I'm gonna say. Tony Face 2007, during the Trump's government at arms sales to countries like Bahrain and Qatar, they would invite some Israeli politician to a dummy desk signing a Fox. Dummy desk signing, and Fox would commend Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah, I know, it's comical. Progressive Kansas says, Wisconsin law forbidding firing of employees using his or her religious liberties. Oh, that's interesting. Great, so I think anyone who's on the left in Wisconsin should cite their religious beliefs in refusing to do certain work they don't want to do. My religious belief means that I can't take that mandatory overtime shift. You can't fire me, sorry. It's my deeply held religious belief. They will put,
by the way, deeply held doesn't mean anything.
Religious extremism over human lives. Like they
100%. No, it's just code word, deeply held. Oh, so a new cult or whatever doesn't count, but like this is deeply held. It doesn't mean anything, it's just personal.
R Stone, God, we're increasingly living in a theocracy. It's terrifying. R Stone writes in and says, how come Ben & Jerry's isn't a sponsor for Solo Wednesdays? Anna Cadeau ice cream sounds like a winner. Ice cream. Cadeau?
Is it Anacado?
Oh, like Anacado. Got it.
I think somebody on our team needs to reach out to Ben & Jerry's.
I know. Guest writes it and says, a cross without Jesus crucified on it is just a torture symbol. I guess the religious right doesn't understand that. I love crosses, torture symbol. That's actually kind of true.
Well, at least in their defense, they've been pretty consistent with that imagery for quite a while at this point.
Yep.
I get it.
French Fry writes in and says, I heard someone call SCOTUS the extreme court. I thought it was pretty apropos. Yep, absolutely, it is extreme. Zoltan Hall says, you can't abort an unwanted or life-threatening pregnancy, and now they don't even want you to prevent yourself from getting pregnant in the first place. The Handmaid's Tale has nothing on our current reality. They are concerned, this is my theory, they're concerned about lower birth rates. They want white women to give birth more. I think this is what this is about, and control. Anyway, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. Let's get to our next story.
What Trump's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory, but that doesn't mean he's the winner. He's just going to say he's the winner.
That was leaked audio of Steve Bannon from October 20th of 2020, laying out Trump's plan to falsely declare victory no matter what the results of the election are. And Bannon explains how exactly this plot would play out, how it would work out in Trump's favor. Let's listen.
More of our people vote early that count. Theirs voted mail. And so they're going to have a natural disadvantage, and Trump's going to take advantage of it. That's our strategy. He's going to declare himself a winner. So when you wake up Wednesday morning, it's going to be a firestorm. We're going to have Antifa crazy, the media crazy, the courts are crazy, and Trump's going to be sitting there mocking, tweeting about you lose. I'm the winner. I'm the king.
So that was part of Bannon's big brain plot to essentially steal the election from the rightful winner, Joe Biden, and at that time, assuming Biden wins. And it is interesting that he assumed Biden would win.
Yeah, well, that's interesting that they assume, and he at least seems to understand the red mirage, that whole thing that we spent literally months trying to get the country to understand what would happen, and then they all pretended that they didn't. But also that when he's talking behind the scenes to whoever it was that thought his jokes were funny there, he doesn't even pretend, like they're supposed to pretend that something corrupt happened, but Trump really did win. It was stolen. He doesn't even pretend that.
Yeah.
Like he's very clear. No, like yeah, they're gonna win, and we're gonna steal it anyway. The only thing where he was really wrong was Antifa's gonna be crazy, the courts are gonna be crazy, the media was crazy. No, stuff was crazy for months after the election. It wasn't Antifa in the courts. It was Trump's legal team, Trump's tweets. You guys, all of you were crazy. The mobs were crazy.
Yeah, the mobs were absolutely crazy. I mean, we saw what that looked like on January 6th. But to your point about the courts, remember the Trump camp challenged the results of the election and alleged there was widespread voter fraud in 61 court battles, and they lost 60 of them. Okay, and you know why? Because there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud.
Well, that really made it unfair. Super hard to win those cases then.
And to me,
I feel for them.
Look, this makes it clear, like there are allegations of voter fraud. We already knew it was BS. But like this leaked audio makes it clear that like Bannon expected Biden to win, and they were gonna lie and do whatever they could to steal the election in their favor, no matter what. Yeah, and this is like out of everything that we've seen attempted by the Trump camp, this was definitely attempted. It didn't work, obviously. But this was like the genius idea that genius Steve Bannon had in mind, right? Just say that you won anyway. Just say that you won.
Yeah.
Just say that you won. I'm really smart.
Just tweet about it and you win.
It's just so stupid. Like, there have been multiple profiles. I think one of the more recent ones was in the New Yorker, if I'm not mistaken, on Steve Bannon. And they can't stop calling him smart. He's a bad guy and everything, yeah, but he's super smart. Is he smart? This was his strategy? Just say that you won.
I don't know.
God, like bloated weirdo who somehow thinks that he's like part of the best race, the top. Look at that guy. You think you're on top?
I don't know.
Anyway, let's continue. The pre-election audio, by the way, comes from Mother Jones. They obtained it. Here's what we know about it. The pre-election audio comes from a meeting between Bannon and half a dozen supporters of an exiled Chinese mogul for whom Bannon has been working. Bannon also helped this guy with a series of pro-Trump Chinese language news websites that have promoted an array of far-right misinformation, including a video streaming site called GTV. The meeting was intended to help GTV plan its election night coverage, right? So this exiled gentleman, I think, lives in the United States now. Gu Wengwei is his name. Now, that was not the only plot to help Trump win the elections. Here's more on how he directly helped sabotage Joe Biden's campaign. Bannon met with this Guo guy, with his associates, and it occurred a few weeks after Bannon, working with Giuliani, had provided the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop to the New York Post. Bannon acknowledged in a recording that he had also helped supply Guo's supporters with this material. He then directed his backers to put sex videos and other salacious content from the laptop online. Let's just address that real quick. I don't know if you guys have seen those Hunter Biden videos on Twitter. Why is the right wing trying to make Hunter Biden look cool?
I don't know.
Have you noticed that?
They're very obsessed with seeing him naked. I've noticed that.
They are obsessed with seeing him naked, but like, one of the more recent ones has like a pretty dope rap song behind it. Like it looks like a music video. Yeah. Like I'm like,
yeah.
I don't know if this is really doing what you guys think it's doing, but okay.
Well, yeah, and we're obviously being dismissive. If he had any attachment to American politics, we would care.
Yeah.
He has nothing to do with it. He's an apparently troubled guy for legitimate reasons, and also gets up to stuff that conservatives would consider like, ooh, risque. Neither of those.
He has sex.
He does occasionally F. Neither of those have anything to do with American politics. He wasn't having meetings in Trump Tower with like Russian exiles and whatever. He's not doing business deals to set up Biden Tower in Moscow. Like find some attachment. He's not giving campaign speeches, even shallow stuff.
Yeah.
He has nothing to do with any of it. And let me just remind people.
I love you guys. Like, just take this in. The story is amazing. Okay. Bannon's big-brained strategy was number one, just declare that you won. And then that's it. If you declare it, then it means you won, right? That was strategy number one, failed. What a genius. Strategy number two, put out there that Joe Biden's son was addicted to drugs and had sex. And put together these really fun-looking like music video type tweets that will do what? Like no one cares. Like people will care if, like you mentioned, Hunter Biden has any political power or any influence over policies that impact our daily lives. He doesn't.
Well, the right wing, like they try to get worked up over the Hunter Biden stuff, but that's just projection. They know how bad the Trump kids stuff is. They know that Trump kids were literally working in the White House. They know that people like Jared Kushner went off and got billions of dollars handed to them specifically because of their attachment to the former president. And they just want there to be whataboutism in that area, and it just hasn't stuck. And all these plans, just bear in mind, whether it's Trump's just gonna tweet, or Hunter Biden's D, or like whether it's we're gonna throw it back to the state, all this stuff that they tried to do to take over the country, all Trump had to do was suck a little bit less as president. That's it. It was a very close election.
Yeah.
In part because Biden's a really weak candidate. In part because the Democrats didn't really do much to give people a reason to believe that they would do anything in office, and they've made good on that. They haven't really done much. Also, the country's ridiculously gerrymandered. There's a lot of voter suppression. All he needed to do was like maybe take the pandemic a little bit seriously, not even totally seriously. A little bit, he could have legitimately won the election, but he wasn't willing to do any of that.
Right.
It would be so easy with how rigged this system is for them to stay in power forever if they could even pretend to give a damn about the American people.
They can't do it though.
And so instead they have to do coups.
Look, we talk about incentive structures, right? And right now, the way our government is set up, it incentivizes the worst people to seek power. Because what Congress, for instance, messages to the American people right now is, you might come in as an affluent person if you're lucky, you might get elected into Congress, but you get to trade individual stocks based on insider information without any consequences.
Yep.
So you'll come out as a millionaire. You'll also probably get to take advantage of that revolving door and make a ton of money as a lobbyist. The incentive structure is screwed up. It attracts the worst people to run for Congress. And I think the same thing can be said of the executive branch, especially with Donald Trump using the office of the presidency to enrich himself, to direct federal taxpayer money to his businesses.
Yep.
So that's really the problem. Look, there are tons of bad people out there. The question is, how do we change our system? How do we change our government? How do we reform it so government doesn't attract the worst people among us? But we're not having that conversation. And I think that's the problem. Anyway, let's go to break. When we come back, we'll talk about one trigger happy guy in Florida. Later on, we'll also talk about Josh Hawley and how he was slapped down during a recent Senate hearing. That and more coming right up. makes a great point, and this is actually what I was thinking about as I was commenting on Biden's age showing. Like, Bernie's 80 and just threw a strike at a ceremonial first pitch at a Vermont minor league game. By the way, Bernie loves baseball. Like, I love how much he loves baseball. It's really sweet. And like, he looks out for those minor leaguers, which means a lot because minor leaguers are just so underpaid, undervalued. They get crappy food. Like, it's just bad. It's bad. People think like, oh, they're professional baseball players. They're probably paid decent. No, they make less than minimum wage. And Bernie was the only one who was willing to draw attention to that and fight for better conditions for them. What were you gonna say, John? Oh, sorry. Okay. So yes, you're right, Brenda. Like Bernie, again, it's not about the number. It's about whether or not you're able to do the job. And as we get older, obviously, like we all experience physical decline, mental decline, some earlier than others. And I feel like with Biden, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like it kicked in a little earlier than it did or has with Bernie. Like Bernie's good. He's still sharp. He's a little grumpy, but I love that about him. It's like my favorite quality about him. So anyway, Robert writes it and says, Joe Biden put Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court and got 10 Democrat votes to do it.
Yeah.
But Hal Sparks loves it. Hal Sparks loves it. God.
That group, the Biden can do no wrong, or they're annoying, but at least they are. I think there's the smallest number of them. Like even some of the people who were really committed during the 2020 election that were like true Biden believers are questioning him over Roe v. Wade and stuff.
Are they? French Fry writes it and says, Anna, you empower me to be stronger and more outspoken. I love your fire and salt. Thank you, I appreciate that. Also special thanks to our YouTube members, Katie H, James, Marilis, Kenneth, and Fred Alley. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for supporting the show. You're gonna love our bonus episode today. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna lighten things up. It's just,
we need it.
We do need it. We do need it. All right, a lot of member comments here, so let me try to get through as many as I can. Oh, Jam writes in and says, I hope they play that audio back at him when he testifies, meaning Steve Bannon. He's just gonna get up there to troll, but I at least hope people can see him confronted with his own recorded words, demonstrating his intent to plot a coup. They've been doing a really good job with those hearings. So if he does actually go through with testifying, I think he's gonna be confronted with a lot, which will be great. Don't shoot, I'm the goalkeeper says, it was still a coup, Bolton. It was just a failed coup, exactly. He's trying to minimize what happened and it's ridiculous. All right, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show. Let's get to our next story.
Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
So that was the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on abortion rights. It was titled "A Post-Roe America: The Legal Consequences of the Dobbs Decision." And the point of the hearing wasn't just to focus on abortion rights. They also wanted to focus on the fact that you have right-wing zealots, right-wing theocrats in the Supreme Court who lied under oath as they were undergoing their confirmation hearings, and they said that Roe v. Wade and reproductive freedom was already, they've determined this is the law of the land, we're not gonna touch it. First thing they do is they reverse it, of course. So they were going to explore that, very important issues, especially in the new climate that we're living in, where a 10-year-old gets raped in Ohio, gets pregnant as a result of that rape, and has to travel out of state to Indiana to get an abortion. Okay, so this is an important issue. And bad faith, right-wing, culture war manufacturers like Josh Hawley decide to hijack this important hearing to, of course, create more content that they can use to campaign on. That's what this was about. And I think the way that Khiara Bridges, who's the expert testifying there, the way she handled it was, I think it was fantastic.
It was masterful.
Because she dismissed, she was informative, but more importantly, she dismissed him. And he, along with other Republican lawmakers, deserve to be dismissed on this issue because it's bad faith. They know there's a difference between gender and sex. They know that it is very possible for someone to be born a biological male or a biological female, but in terms of gender, identify differently as a male or non-binary, but they still have the biological capacity, the physical capacity to get pregnant. So that's why the language, the rhetoric is inclusive to include those people. It is not a big deal, but they make it a big deal. They manufacture it into a big deal because that's all Republicans are. That's all they have. This is all they do. Endless bad faith arguments meant to fearmonger and direct hatred and fear toward other Americans, typically powerless Americans, while they rob you blind, by the way, while they enable corporations to rob you blind.
Yep.
That's what this is about. I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of it. I'm so freaking sick of it.
Yeah, the one blessing we have is that he's particularly bad at it. He thought he came equipped. He thought he was loaded for bear. Do you mean women? And she had no, like you think that your live questioning of this expert is gonna be like Matt Walsh's like carefully edited little thing that he put together? You think that's how that's gonna work out for you? No, see, you're a pretend intellect. She's an actual intellect. There's a difference between the two. It's just demonstrated in that video. He can't dispute anything that she says, and much more importantly, he knows the difference between sex and gender. There are some that are so stupid that they can't actually grasp the difference between biology and a social construct of gender, but he understands it, but he also understands what party he's in. And there is a lot that you have to pretend not to understand to be a successful Republican. Yeah. He's not great at it. He's not even great at doing the pretending. And he's doing it for the reasons that you identified. Like if you're a Republican, if you're a conservative, you're watching this, and maybe you clicked on it because like your whole life has become hating trans people, like a guy who would spend his time doing what you just saw, do you think he gives a damn about your wages? Seriously. Do you think this is a person that cares whether you're ever able to own a home? Or like really, do you think he cares if you retire? Like please don't tell me that you actually believe that Josh Hawley cares if you suffer medical bankruptcy someday, if you can afford insulin month to month. You know that he doesn't. You know that this is a substitute for all of that. A poor substitute, poorly delivered, but that's what it's intended to do.
I can't stomach how easy it is to manipulate Americans with this garbage.
Yeah. I mean, the Democrats have their own version of it.
Understandably, yes, of course Democrats have their own version of that. I'm working on an entire book about it, okay? So I'm not gonna promote it until there's some realistic dates that I can throw your way. But nonetheless, moving along. No, I mean, people are angry right now.
Yeah.
People are furious. People see the country falling apart. Our institutions are failing us. Our institutions have been gutted, dismantled. People are terrified about the future. Inflation is definitely impacting people. Like these are very real concerns. But I just want Republican voters, listen, you're scared of transgender people? Okay, they're not doing any harm. They're not causing any harm, but sure, fine, you're scared of them. But you should be, like the frustration you're feeling in America right now, the stuff that actually impacts your life on a daily basis, those are issues that are caused by the Republican lawmakers you support and allow to scare you about literally the least powerful people in the country. Literally, like, what? This is what I want to understand. Why is it so hard to just refer to someone the way they want to be referred to? Why is it so hard? It takes no effort, it takes zero effort, but somehow Republican lawmakers have manipulated the minds of American voters, particularly those on the right, to think this is an issue they should fight to the death.
Yep.
This is the most important issue. You are being robbed. You're being robbed by the very lawmakers who are distracting you with nonstop culture war garbage. Nonstop.
Yeah.
Nonstop. It has no effect on your life other than maybe briefly being a little bit of an inconvenience, I guess, by referring to them with the pronoun they prefer.
Yep.
That's it, that's all it is. You know, you probably pay a lot more percentage-wise in taxes than the wealthy people that fund Josh Hawley's campaign. Do you know about that? Do you care about that? Why is it that the wealthiest people in this country pay way less in federal taxes than you do? Why? Why is income inequality a massive problem that disparity continues to explode in this country?
Yep.
Why is the middle class disappearing? Is it because of transgender people?
Yeah.
I'm just, listen, we might disagree politically on a whole host of issues. I get it. I just want American voters across the board, Democrats and Republicans, to understand that these bad faith arguments that demonize powerless people, and by the way, the media takes part in it as well, are specifically meant to distract you from the fact that you're being robbed blind. That's it, that's what this is about. There's more in this interaction I want to get to, so let's watch the next video.
Your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing that.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important.
Because of my line of questioning?
Because,
so we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist.
I'm denying that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get pregnant.
So you're denying that trans people exist?
That's what he's doing.
Yeah, and look, I want to make a distinction here, right? Because Josh Hawley is different from an ordinary person who maybe is not privy to these debates or these conversations, maybe doesn't know much about the transgender community and is confused by, some of the language that's used by people who want to be as inclusive as possible. There are people out there who just don't know, and there might be a misstep here and there, and they just be calm, explain to them, right? They're asking legitimate questions. I want to differentiate normal people who might not know, who genuinely just want to ask questions because they're curious, they want to be informed.
Sure.
There's a difference between those people. I don't think those people are advocating for violence toward transgender people, but we're not talking about that here. We're talking about Josh Hawley, who, contrary to what he's presenting himself as in that video, is not a moron and is engaging in a bad faith line of questioning to essentially demonize, by the way, I don't even know how many pregnant transgender males there are out there. I don't know, right? I don't know the numbers, but they exist. And he knows they exist, right? He knows there's a difference between biology and gender. He knows.
He's pretending, that's all it is.
That's all it is, it's all bad faith garbage. And I'm so tired of these hearings being hijacked by these garbage lawmakers who want to give you the illusion of governing. They want to give you the illusion of legislating. They want to make it seem like they're actually doing something for you, when in reality, they're wasting time as women in this country are dealing with pregnancies as a result of rape and can't do a damn thing about it because they live in a draconian red state that has stripped them of their reproductive rights. That is what this hearing is about. It's not about your bad faith, fear-mongering arguments toward the trans community. Wrap it up. But more importantly, voters, please be smarter than this, because again, you're being robbed blind. You're being robbed blind by people like Josh Hawley enabling these disgusting corporations who rob us day in, day out. We got to do the bonus episode. If you're a member, you're gonna love it. If you're not, you should be one. tyt.com/join. We'll see you there.
our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with it. Oftentimes when we're